What's happening, guys? Today I want to talk about when it's time to finally go through a reverse diet. Okay, first things first, if you do not know what a reverse diet is, this video probably will not make a whole lot of sense. I did a roundtable with GT Nutrition and Performance before. I'll link on here somewhere so you can check it out, which will go into more detail on it. But the main premise of a reverse diet is to work on metabolic building, all right? So you kind of slowly and gradually increase calories over time, start to taper off your cardio, and try to get your metabolism working a little bit better while trying to minimize kind of fat gain by taking things slow and just working on building your metabolic rate. Okay, so that's kind of the idea behind reverse dieting. Way oversimplification, but I don't want to make this a crazy long video. So the real question now becomes, when is it time to do a reverse diet? How do you know when it's time, or if you should continue to cut, if you should stop, if you should reverse, when should you do it? So a lot of things kind of come into play with this, but I think a good overall rule of thumb is if you're in a cut, and I'm talking for non-competitors right now, okay? So I mean, if you're, I think it's kind of obvious in ways that if you're done with a show and you're coming out of it, it's probably a time to reverse diet, all right? But anyway, for non-competitors, people who are just dieting, maybe you still have some weight to lose, but you're just not sure if you should continue to do it or if you should go through a reverse. I really believe the time to do it is kind of when you get to a point where it's just become way too difficult to continue doing what you're doing, all right? So your calories have gotten really low. Your cardio has gotten really high. You're finding it to be just a major drag all the time. You know, you feel like if you cut any more calories, you would go absolutely crazy. You would be starving all the time. You'd be miserable. You're absolutely drained because you're doing so much cardio, right? So this level will be a lot different for everybody. And I can't just give a certain number of calories and a certain number of cardio for everybody because it's very, very different, okay? A 60-year-old lady who is 130 pounds trying to lose some weight is a lot different than a 250-pound, 25-year-old male who wants to drop more, okay? I mean, one person is going to be eating very few calories, one's going to be eating a lot more, but it's all relative to each and every individual. So you always have to keep that in mind. So we can't just put generic calorie goals and say, okay, once you get below, say, 1,200 calories, you need to reverse. That's just not the case. Some people need to get below 1,200 calories, right? It really depends. But it just gets down to the point where if you're not going to be able to take it anymore, this is a really good time to stop and start working on metabolic building, okay? You're getting to a point where you're so miserable that you're probably just going to start binging. You're probably going to start doing things that while you're in a lowered state of metabolism, you're going to do things that are going to build fat really fast, okay? So, I mean, if you get down to a point where you're only eating 1,000 calories a day and you're doing, 2 hours of cardio, and it's just like to the point where you can't take it anymore, and if you just say, F it, and you just eat like crazy, well, you're going to gain fat really fast. So we want to avoid these things from taking place, okay? We want to stop getting to the F it moments and the point of binging, and we want to create a more structured and sustainable plan for ourselves. So if you get to this point where you're feeling really miserable, now you stop and now you start adding in calories slowly. How fast also depends on not only each individual, but also kind of what your goals are and what you're willing to put up with. You have to understand the faster you increase calories, the sooner you're going to feel better, the faster your metabolic rate is going to start to kick back up again, but also the more likely you are to put on body fat. So the slower, it's going to take longer, but you're also going to have an easier time not putting on additional body fat, or at least minimizing it as much as possible. Okay, so that's a good starting point anyway. There's many factors that go into it. I mean, you can cut down for a while, and you don't have to the point where you're miserable. I mean, if you start cutting down and you start getting to a point where you think, okay, it might start getting a little challenge, stop for a while, do a reverse for a while, go back to a cut later. There's no rush to do this stuff. You don't have to do it all in one shot. Many people need multiple cycles of cutting and reversing, okay? It just really depends on what you're willing to put up with, what you're willing to do, and how far you're willing to push, and just where you are and what your comfort levels are. All right, that was a way oversimplification of the process and when you should do it, but if you have any questions about this process or anything about reverse dieting whatsoever, just leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. Otherwise, as always, I will see you guys in the next video.
I'm addicted to the love that you're giving. Every minute, every day I've been craving.